Welcome to another OCD Recovery Instagram Live. This is going to be a long video today because I'm going to be talking about the problems with mindfulness and the benefits with mindfulness, because I just did a post talking about that and I got a lot of questions, so I thought it's going to be very difficult to describe in full detail because it's a very technical thing that very few people understand in relation to OCD. So I thought, well, I've got to come on here and cover that topic in detail with all the sort of technicalities involved so that it clears it up and gives you a good understanding of what's involved there. So, with mindfulness, what you're doing is you're becoming a peaceful observer of your thoughts, okay? And thoughts, anxiety, any sensation internally. This is a really, really important part of the OCD recovery journey, because by becoming an observer of your thoughts, you're able to get out of that internal locking, fighting mechanism that goes on in your head. So that is really important. However, if you just, when you do that and you learn that and you learn to become this observer, you will feel this slight bit of freedom after time, slight freedom that's coming in, okay? So there becomes this slight freedom where you feel more at peace. But OCD by nature locks and latches, so it's hooked. So say, for example, I used to sit in a yoga class in the past. I would sit in there with harm OCD thoughts and that'd be cutting through like a hot knife through butter. And that would be locked, although I would feel free around the edges now. I'm feeling more free than before. I'm feeling more calm than I usually was. I'm feeling more internal peace, but it's latched, cutting like a hot knife through butter, straight down the middle, that locked on anxiety, okay? That ain't going with mindfulness. The brain won't release. It sees a threat and it grips, okay? That is usually what's going to happen. Now, with that thought, with that thing locked on there, latched, people then get panic, because they're reading these mindfulness books. Oh, I'm not relaxed enough. Oh, I'm not observing enough. I must do more meditation. I must do more mindfulness. And that's not going to help because it's still latched and locked. Now so it's an important thing, first of all, to get rid of that inner work rate. Why? Because a lot of OCD sufferers are like this. Oh my God, I need to know the answer to that. Oh my God, I need to know the answer to this. What was I thinking that for? Why was I thinking this? And then they're like jumping all over the place. You've got that really fast internal work rate. Now, when that really fast internal work rate's going on, they're not going to be able to slow down at all. So having that sort of the mindfulness, sort of understanding that, and that's why mindfulness plays a significant part in becoming an observer of the thoughts. But what mindfulness won't do is release that latching, okay? So, we're not saying mindfulness is no good. We're not saying that at all. We're saying mindfulness has its place. Beneficial in OCD recovery, yes, but counterproductive at the same time. Why? It's beneficial in becoming an observer of the thoughts, making peace with the thoughts. That's true. That plays a significant part, okay? But where it becomes counterproductive is when they can't feel a release, then they get frustrated, and then that leads to the opposite there of the mindfulness. That's one part. The next thing that you've got that's occurring is this, and this is the key point of this whole video and this topic that I'm talking about. When we take ourselves internal, now people with mindfulness will say it's the opposite. It's about letting thoughts be there and being external. Right, I understand that when you've understood it and you can feel it as a peaceful observer, but it doesn't work as simplistic as that, because an OCD sufferer is locked in their head, very much tightly wound in the mechanism. Now let's imagine they've got somatic OCD, sensory motor OCD. They've got intrusive feelings and sensations, fear of blinking, fear of saliva in their mouth, fear of different sensations in the face, that they're concentrating on and feel locked on in an anxiety repetitive cycle that they feel they can't get out of. If you then tell the person, okay, you need to observe thoughts, just by saying observe and leave thoughts there and welcome them in, right? That's fine. We have to welcome in thoughts. But because mindfulness is very much focused on changing that interpretation, so by essence, that is being more aware inside of how you're thinking and leaving that to be more freeing. Just by doing that, making that focus inside, the sensory motor OCD sufferer is now brought into their mind. They're thinking, okay, let me think about that thought. Okay, be at peace with that, leave that there. Okay, but it's still latched. It's not leaving. Now they're looking, they've got an eye like a hawk internally watching it. Now, yes, if they just left it and went about their day, but that's not it. That's why we emphasize so much, bring it for the ride. Everything we teach is about bringing it for the ride, leaving it there, changing our relationship with it, not needing it to be gone, living our life, being external, going and doing our life, going and functioning, going and having lunch, going to the cinema, whatever. Doing that, bringing it for the ride, not going internal in trying to sit there and think, okay, how am I observing this? How am I feeling? Because you've started interaction. I know it is the opposite of interaction. It's leaving. But when somebody is in this complete web internally locked in their mind, completely locked like this in there, anything that takes them in, it's the opposite. Let me give you an example. People come to me, they've got very bad OCD. Not everyone. People come to me with OCD that's affecting them a bit. Most people come to me where it's really affecting their life. I work with obviously the most severe cases of people who are really, really ill, going from centre to centre, looking for relief and have been stuck for decades. And I have people that have had it for a short time, or people who've had it. Normally, people have had it quite a few years, and it's affecting all day, every day. But there's obviously range in how it's affecting people. Now, my point being that. Nearly lost my point there after saying that. Nearly forgotten what I was saying. But the problem is that with this sensory motor, the sufferer is so scared of being stuck forever that OCD is latched. It's latched in there because it knows that you want rid. It knows that you're terrified of being stuck forever. So OCD is latched in there. Now, with the mindfulness, they've gone in now in their head internally. Here's what I was going to say. When OCD sufferers come in like that, often they've got what we call is like it's not a known term. It's a coined term that we've used in the community to say it's like an OCD glaze, where they look like they're looking through a misted sheet of glass, where they're just like this. They're sitting there like this. They're talking, and they're interacting with their family, but they're not really there, and they're just caught up completely in their head with the OCD, with everything. They're just locked up in their head there. And they'll speak to their mum, I'll have that cup of tea, I'll have that, but they're not really interacting, they're just stuck behind this glaze. And often there'll be things like they want people to know they're suffering, so they'll sort of keep doing things like, like that, because they're locked and they want to give off a sign that they're stuck, okay? Now, when they're locked in that glaze, imagine I came along and said, right, we need to be doing a lot of mindfulness, okay? We want to sit there, observe thoughts, completely locked up, absolutely no chance of getting them out of that. That is a later part of the journey, plays a significant part when they're more free and they can observe, and then that comes into play. These things have to be at certain times. At that point, they need to be connecting externally. Right, off the PlayStation, go outside. I'm not talking about COVID times, I'm talking about normal times. Go outside, socialise, see people, stop sitting indoors, playing PlayStation, on your phone all the time. This is all very internalised behaviour where you're sort of locked in your mind, just looking here, a bit of distraction. It's not very external. So we're connecting the environment, going for a run, going outdoors, doing all this stuff, okay? So it's getting us connected outside. It's pulling us outside of that internal web, okay? Now, this is why I couldn't explain this all in a post, because it's a very, very technical thing. And the reason it's a nightmare to explain any of these things is because of the nature of social media. Whereas if you say one thing against something that someone believes in, even if there is a very good reason why you're saying, people are like, no, you can't say that, this thing is this. And then you've got the whole nature of social media where anyone can just write, I disagree, and that's supposed to be given some extreme weight in an argument on a comments, where someone just says, I disagree, with no argument at all. And then you've got to follow that up. So it becomes a nightmare, because you just have strong opinions thrown out on different things with no explanation of why. And in the social media realm, that becomes a nightmare. So the best way to deal with that is to do it in a video format like this, as well as in the comments, and respond as best you can to all the different comments with different stories, and hearing all arguments where there is an argument, not just I disagree, which is often seen on social media. So in the video, you can conjure all that idea up so that you can see what I'm talking about here in relation to that. So it's very common someone comes into the door to see me, and I will say, right, tell me a little bit about your OCD. And they'll be like, right, I've spent 2 hours a day doing meditation for the last 2 months. I've been to Thailand to a Buddhist retreat. I've done all of that, and I've felt a bit of more relaxation, but none of it's unlatched. At that point, those people are feeling very hopeless, especially with all the apps these days. So many of those apps are meditation based. Do these meditation apps, that's fine, and it's very helpful for taking the edge off. But it doesn't bring relief, and it's often missold because somebody goes in there thinking that's going to bring relief. And then they do that, and then they still feel stuck. And I know it's a process, but often how these things are implied. Because you see, mindfulness is a very easy thing to sell. You can just say, it's like if a celebrity wants to has got better and they want to write a book to quickly sell, they can package up some simplistic mindfulness points, shove that in a book like many self-help books are. If you take a range of self-help books off a self-help book section in a bookstore, majority of those are sort of about 10 points that are all mustered together in the same book in various different ways, pretty much referring to all the same points. So there's not much new. I mean, I could guess what's going to be in most self-help books in about 5 points. It's usually things like giving up a fight, living in the now is a big one, which obviously these are vital points, but they're oversimplified. Live in the now, be anything you want to be, and then obviously then you've got all the universe stuff that they often go into, because that is like a sort of almost modern day, it's kind of, the way it's packaged is like a modern day religion, in the sense that you've got this ask the universe stuff that's going on, which obviously doesn't work with OCD. I spent years sitting there praying, asking the universe, just wishing that the universe would do something for me. It doesn't work like that. That didn't get me better. But all these books, they're like that usually. Ask the universe, and you will get this. They're kind of like the secret concept, which has got some great concepts in terms of sort of empowering yourself and making yourself feel more determined. But overall, it's just repackaged because it's easy to write. It's easy for celebrities to sell it because it's very simplistic in nature. And so mindfulness is sold like that often. A couple of brief mindfulness tips. It's a sort of modern word now, which is good because things are changing and becoming more positive. So any support behind all these things in the mental health world is great. But the problem is it's oversimplified. So you'll pick up a book and it'll have simplistic mindfulness tips, asking the universe, be anything you want to be, live in the now, not taking on too much, having more time for you, following your goals, goal setting, and lots of stuff about sort of empowering yourself, very much behind the whole self-esteem concept usually. So they're very much based on empowering yourself, so you're improving your self-esteem, which is ridiculous because self-esteem is completely conditional. If you're saying I'm good because I've done such and such task, well, what happens when you don't do that task? You're now no good. So that becomes a nightmare scenario as well. So what we have there is we have to ensure we have to look at this whole sort of self-esteem stuff and move when it comes to. That's why one of the most famous books on our reading list is The Myth of Self-Esteem by Albert Ellis, which shows us that self-esteem is conditional, and instead adopting unconditional self-acceptance, we're accepting ourselves as a human, fallible human. But if we make mistakes, that doesn't take away from our self-esteem. And like a lot of these books are written, it's held in, and sort of celebrity quotes are all around sort of like self-esteem is, to be sort of like held like a sort of piece of gold, the last bit of gold you have, which is ridiculous, because then obviously all the anxiety is going to be latched to that, waiting for you. What if you drop it? So that's very much the case of what a lot of these things are like. So if an OCD sufferer is going into that self-help realm, they can get completely lost. And if they're going into very basic mindfulness, they'll feel completely lost again, because they'll think, well, I've done all that and I haven't got better. So it has its part. It plays a significant part. It really makes a difference in the journey and is very important in getting us to get out of that internal work rate. But on its own, it's not. And on its own, it can bring peace, but usually it's often done wrong. And so the person then feels more lost and more stuck and so on. So there's a lot of that goes on. Now, what we have to think with all of these things that we're doing is it comes down to this whole thing that I'm talking about here, is where recovery is oversimplified. So what happens is, especially with a lot of these books, are being written by the point of an anxiety sufferer, someone who's suffering from anxiety in general. I'm not talking about generalized anxiety disorder in the form of it as an anxiety disorder, but just more anxious than another person. Now, that's a common misconception made often. both in the medical community and in the general public. Generalized anxiety disorder is massively overdiagnosed, whereas actually someone can just be a little bit more anxious than another person. That's one thing. But then being constantly locked in a state of free-floating anxiety with physical symptoms is another. And so then what you're having is you've got the situation where that individual is reading books on just where someone says, yeah, I've recovered from anxiety, just generally feeling a bit more anxious. They think that would work for me. Well, OCD is a very, very different thing. OCD is like, it feels like a machine is churning in your head. The anxiety loop feels like it's against you, stronger and more overpowering than you. That's how it feels. Mindfulness, in terms of breaking that anxiety cycle and letting that fade out, is like sort of trying to treat pneumonia with a vitamin C tablet. It doesn't work like that. So I think that's very, very important to bear that in mind. Now, all these books and things that we read have some very helpful points. But whilst we've read one, we're reading another and all the same points. And that's the same with a lot of these mindfulness principles. They're all repackaged in other books. So once you've got so far, you realise, well, wait a minute, that's not actually making any further difference. Things aren't changing, things aren't improving anymore. So we have to look deeper. We have to look at the core irrational beliefs that are fueling the cycle. That's one. Then we also have to look at, do we believe this? Do we really believe these beliefs, these newfound rational beliefs? Do we believe them? If we believe them, then we don't have that anxious cycle that we're in when we were believing the irrational. So that's another part of it. And so to see that and to believe that takes time and practice. You're not going to change your rational beliefs that you've held for years and years and years overnight. So that's important. So there's quite a lot going on there in terms of changing your relationship with the thoughts, changing your relationship with anxiety, breaking down irrational beliefs. There's a lot going on. And I think it's very important to highlight all of that because obviously recovery journey involves an understanding of how OCD operates to a much better degree, but not over the top knowledge on that. Breaking down the irrational beliefs, which takes time and practice through exposures and disputing beliefs and so on. So there's a lot to do with that. And then there's obviously changing our relationship with the thoughts and anxiety, both in a mindfulness way as well as bringing it for the ride. Mindfulness alone with a very strong internal focus or an observational focus, but the observation is still pulling you inwards because it's very easy to do that, becomes a hindrance. So that is what I wanted to come on here to do today. Talk about that in general. I'm not liking this new Instagram format. It's a bit difficult to see the comments, but let me have a look through here. One second. I have to get used to this new Instagram format. You can make yourself smaller and then see all the pictures. Which type of supplements and diet should I intake to combat OCD? Diet, although again a very popular topic in this era that we're living in and important to eat healthily and to exercise and so on. If anyone is recommending a diet for OCD recovery, they do not know about OCD. Now, unfortunately, you do see this even recommended on some major OCD pages and accounts. Diet is not going to do it. Okay, that's not going to do it. You can eat the healthiest and work out 5 times a week, and you still feel like crap. So it's not going to work like that. Okay, so you do have to get into. So having a healthy diet and exercise has its benefits. We encourage that, but alone, it's not going to so-called cure OCD. Okay, let's have a look here. In relation to all the questions and answers, the questions that are relating to OCD in general, I'll be covering those in another OCD question and answers on the YouTube channel in the next couple of days, so I can cover those specifically. But I wanted to come on here to really speak about this mindfulness situation because it's so important, because so many people get lost in it. And it's very important to understand how we're approaching our own journeys, because then we don't feel lost or stuck when something's not working, because we can see a hurdle. It's like if somebody said to you, okay, setting up a business is easy, invest all your money and it will be an overnight success. You'll be very disappointed when you find out 90% of businesses don't work, don't end up becoming a business. that functions, operates. So you've got to have an understanding of what you're trying to achieve. You're trying to achieve OCD recovery, right? That's going to require practice, time, effort into it, and doing all the different things that are needed. However, with it, you are going to have to pivot at times, like many things. Like if you're an athlete and you had an injury, you'd have to maybe change direction in terms of your training to work around that injury to still obtain the same goal. And that's like OCD. You might work and find, mindfulness is very helpful for me. I'm finding it effective. It seems to be working out. Use it. And then you're finding some other things that are helpful. Use that too. But if you were coming at something and you think, I'm over disputing my beliefs at the moment, feeling a bit tired with that, take your foot off the gas. This is an important part of the thing. Then you might think, maybe I'll use a bit more of this. And then you try that. You've got to adapt. You've got to see, because it's learning to it all comes together and flows together. But you won't be able to just apply it like a blueprint. That's what OCD sufferers often want. They want a blueprint to recovery where every box is ticked. They want to people like to message me and say, Rob, I want a blueprint. How did you recover? I'll do something. It doesn't work like that. Yes, it follows more or less exactly the similar path, but certain things won't work and don't work. But overall, how you come towards becoming more accepting is it sort of fades into position. So you do have to look at things. You have to think, okay, maybe been overdoing my mindfulness at the moment and I haven't had much of a benefit lately. I'll try this. I'll bring a bit more of the mindfulness in because I've been overworking in my head and the internal work rate has increased. So you're adapting. It's a gradual, it's a phasing in, as a process. But people want this very fast answer. I need to get this fixed. I need to get this fixed. And then that is often encouraged by a lot of sort of self-help books and so on, which are like, believe in yourself, live in the now, you are the greatest, ask the universe. This is not rational anyway. Ask the universe doesn't guarantee you success, because there's plenty of people who've read The Secret who've never become world famous if that was what they were trying to achieve to do. So it obviously doesn't work for the mass majority. However, it works in the sense that not of asking the universe, but if you really believe in yourself, you've got a lot better chance than someone who doesn't believe in themselves, because then the door's shut. So it encourages that. But you want to move away from that. It's like Eckhart Tolle's book, Power of Now. It's a very good book, and I very much like all the stuff to do with living in the now and changing our focus on that and breaking away from that. I think it's very important part for OCD recovery. However, I think it's often oversimplified, like, if I just live in the now, all my problems will be solved. That ain't true. You could live in the now as much as you want. That don't mean you're going to necessarily be over the top happy. Doesn't work like that. And you've got to think of a lot of things. A lot of things are painted sort of as this sort of painted in a way that if I read this and I get this, my problems will be solved. That's not reality. Human brains are constantly looking for a next problem. You could win the lottery tomorrow, you'll be depressed in a year if you've obviously got thinking habits that have got you there. So that's going to happen. So we have to learn to change that thinking that keeps getting us stuck. And especially with those now, that concept of now and so on. Yes, you can live in the now. But a lot of people, and it's very important, we try more and more to live in the now, because we're often pulled out of the now by all the modern technologies and so on, and our own habits to get out of the now and keep thinking the future or the past and all of that stuff. However, with living in the now, it's often, the people will often talk about it. They'll say, I live completely now. Well, if you're going to sit down and just completely live in the now, I understand that, but you're not going to be able to live in the now all the time. Modern world does involve venturing into the past, venturing into the future. If you're in a business or something where you've got to work out risks in the future, or work out claims that were in the past, or it may be in a sort of an illegal firm, or maybe you're working with the history of criminals or something, or whatever, or history in general, you would have to go back into the past and the forward now. Although you may feel anchored in the now at the moment while still doing that, you're going to be pulled back and forth, because that's what humans do, okay? So a lot of these things is very oversimplified, like you can just suddenly do this and read this and you'll be in this perfect position and everything will be so. It's sort of sold like fix your life when you finish the last page. That don't work like that. That's how it's sold, but it don't work like that, and that's what we're always trying to highlight. And I know I'm quite blunt in tone with how I often talk about these things, because if I'm not, then they get sort of overlooked. And so it's very important to highlight that. Although when it comes to me doing coaching and working with people, it's obviously coming from a compassionate 100% behind you position. but there is an element of tough love, absolutely, because it's needed in OCD. If you look at the families that have OCD sufferers, when it's healthy, tough love with compassion behind the OCD sufferer, they get the best results, and they always have. All the best results I've ever seen come in that format. It's compassion, 100% behind you, but you have to be like that. If you're wishy-washy with this stuff, it's a bloody nightmare. I mean, my own OCD recovery journey was just account after account after account on social media, page after page of the same stuff. Just very wishy-washy stuff. Leave thoughts there, leave it there, welcome it in. That don't work like that. That don't cut it for OCD. That's why so many people are stuck. Because you've got to get in there and you've got to make change. You've got to make change. Okay, it's completely oversimplified. Doesn't work. You can't just leave thoughts there and get over an anxiety disorder that's pumping away adrenaline in your chest, pumping away fear like you think you're about to die. What about if the person does have something happen? They get cancer, God forbid. What are they going to say? Oh, thoughts are thoughts, off you go. No, they've got a problem. They've got to deal with that problem and learn to see it rationally. Then they won't be chronically anxious. That thoughts are thoughts won't work. And that's the problem. Loads of OCD stuff is linked to things that may really happen or may have happened, whatever. I'm not talking about false memory and real event versions of the past. It's always going to make it feel like that. But even in any event, it doesn't matter. You're only anxious because of your perspective of the situation. But these things often, do they do that? I mean, I read so much of that stuff. I used to pick up every book and think, bloody hell, this is exactly the same as what I read last week. And then I'd go to the bookshop. God, all of these things, making it sound so simplistic. I must be so ill because I haven't got better. And all of this stuff looks like everyone else got better with just leaving thoughts there. I must be so weak, have so many things wrong. And it just didn't work. That's why I was stuck. It didn't work. And it still doesn't work. That's what this account is all about. And the community and all the things that we do with the groups and the Facebook group community is showing that. And it's the first thing that people notice when you speak to them straight away. You say, well, the first thing they say is, yeah, look, thoughts are thoughts. It's not worked for me. And leaving thoughts there has not worked for me. I'm still terrified. I've been to countless therapists. I've been to countless places. It's because it doesn't work. That's the reason. Because it's misunderstood. Because unless you have OCD, you won't understand that in terms of the locking. But that doesn't mean just because you have OCD, you're going to understand how to get better and feel better. It's certainly not. It's a lot involved. And the thing is with that is OCD, Albert Ellis really highlighted it, the importance of. And he said, unconditional self-acceptance is the most important variable in their recovery. And it is, because as you learn to get rid of the conditions, OCD doesn't have something to latch to. When you learn to be at peace and accept and see things rationally, you don't have an anxiety cycle. Now, obviously, that can't be applied rigidly. It needs to be adopted gradually as a process, as well as breaking down our interaction with how OCD operates all in our mind and creating distance and space. So there's a lot of that. And that is basically what is involved in the recovery journey. And, every day, most days of the week, I am working with people with OCD, and people who are very ill with OCD for many, many years. And it's constantly talking and changing and shifting beliefs and doing that, and looking at why people are stuck, looking at why people are fighting so hard in their head, and showing them how to change that. It's very difficult to do on your own because you can't see from the outside that sort of insight into, I was doing that and I didn't realise that, and so on. So it's a process that you're going through bit by bit by bit, but we have to really persevere. We have to really take it one day at a time, but really go for it. You don't hear many OCD recovery stories which were just like, oh yeah, I just woke up, I left thoughts there. Oh yeah, I just went about my day, never had a problem. You never hear it. You never ever hear it. You hear things like, I read and read, I worked and worked, I put in the practice, I learned to obviously have a balance and not overdo it. I did that. I was really involved in my recovery. It took a long time, but I got there, and my life is very, very different now. You hear those. You don't hear, I just woke up, left thoughts there, and off I went into the sunset, which we often think it is because so many books simplify it like that. And I think it's so important to talk about all those things, because otherwise you wouldn't know. If I'd just watched this video, for example, 15 years ago, I'd be, that's where I'm going wrong with mindfulness. That's why I feel alone. That's what's going on. And I would have really seen that. And that's why I do what I do, because I want to really highlight that, because it's so vital. That those points are so vital to our recovery journeys, because they give us a little insight. Like, I have an insight about something I'm watching or reading. I think, oh, that's a very good insight into something in life and life philosophy. I think, well, I'll mention that. I think it's an important thing to mention. We have little insights all the time. You know, I've learned some great things from in all unexpected places. I remember I was working with an 8-year-old girl who had OCD about 15 years ago. And she taught me some very good things in terms of insight in relation to OCD. Just by speaking to her and hearing of a really hard struggle and seeing how she interpreted it. And I thought that's very interesting, how she's sort of, her perspective of it, how she's seen that. And that's what people don't realise. People think that insight is only going to come from somebody who has who's a sort of someone who's main in working with OCD, but that's not true. You can get great insight from anyone. You can get great insight from anything in life. I mean, like a lot of Stoic and for philosophy talks about it, it's like, you know, you can get insight just from how a bird lands on a branch on a tree. It's anything, just on how you interpret it. Everything's a lesson. If you start viewing life as everything's a lesson, your life is going to change dramatically. And it's about going about your life looking to interpret everything as a lesson. Anything bad that happens to me, anything mistake that I make, anything that happens, I think, what is there to learn from this? How can I adapt? How can I change to make this improve my life for the better? And at first, you don't want to do it. You want to think, fucking hell, how's that happened? Why has this gone on? What has this done? Why did this have to happen? I don't want a lesson, but the lesson is there. And the lesson is there when you look for it. And the lesson is there in many more things than you're even looking for now. You can look for, not get over the top about looking for them, but there's many interpretations and things that you can take from anything. And we need to do that, especially in OCD recovery. That is why we put so much effort into the OCD sort of communities in terms of the WhatsApp groups and the Facebook group, so you're learning off each other. It's like a kind of swarm mentality where everyone is learning new things from others, and someone's read a book and they've learnt this and so on. You're gaining so much more information than you would if you learnt on your own. The same as why in schools it's in a class system. You know, you're getting a lot of things and benefits from each other, different to as if you would if you were in a one-to-one format. So you're getting all of that from the other OCD sufferers. So it's very important to connect with the OCD community, not in a reassurance compulsive like fashion, but learning and improving your knowledge for OCD recovery. I think that covers about everything I wanted to focus on today. Guys, I will be back on one of the next Q&As soon, covering all your questions and answers. So I will see you back on here again soon. All right, guys, take it easy.